Hey Matt, watch your video again, as ever, very thought-provoking. Again, we do have a lot of similarities and a lot of differences, but obviously it's the differences that I'm going to be focusing on. So, one of your first points was that materialistic worldview will never solve the problem of consciousness. Now, in some ways, I think this is slightly defeatist, but I do see your point to some degree. But where my optimism comes from is the fact that it has been neglected for so very long historically. It was considered the realm of the philosopher for a very long time. Even psychology, which sort of threw the baby out with the bathwater, and the adoption of the behavioralist worldview. They weren't concerned with the inner subjective states. And then even to some degree, cognitive science was really only concerned with the behavior of people, specific domains to do with language production, but their concern was never really consciousness. But, you know, in the past 10 years or so, the progress that has been made on this issue, not just in philosophy of mind, but also in neurology, psychology itself, and artificial intelligence, has been staggering. I think this interdisciplinary approach is really, really what we need to solve one of the most difficult problems that we've perhaps ever faced. And I see each of these different departments as having a slightly different perspective on the thing, but each of them perhaps can show us something that the other department neglects. So neurology can show us the specific basis of the functioning of the human brain, which it seems is necessary for the production of what we would call human consciousness. They can show us how information is perhaps transferred from neuron to neuron, the specific macro and micro structures of the brain. The philosophers can, of course, show us the potential pit holes which we can fall to. You know, the artificial intelligence experts can reverse engineer, and this is what I see artificial intelligence as doing. It's reverse engineering traits that we once considered the specialist domain of humans, and I don't think, as being a pan-experientialist, I would say that you don't think that the actual functioning of the human brain or that is somehow separate from experience itself. And this is where we're very similar. So what I see artificial intelligence as doing is taking the processes, perhaps neuronal processes, but other processes as well, to answer questions that we once thought were the domains of humans alone and not the domains of machines. So I think we can learn a lot from all these different regions, even sociology, social constructionism, and other domains all contribute to this this massive picture of consciousness that we have. Because again, I don't think it's anything separate from all of these other processes that are going on. So in that way, I think a progress in one field helps everyone. So this is where I hold my optimism for the materialist worldview. Now, one other point that you made was that the experimental method can also be used to the subjective experience itself, rather than as we traditionally use it to objective reality, so to speak. While I think this is perhaps a good method of experimentation, I wouldn't necessarily call it science as opposed to meditation, reflection, or enlightenment. And the reason that I wouldn't call it science as such is because, although yes, you can tell me a certain command to do, and I can reflect on that, meditate, and take it into my own experience, verify if what you said is correct or not. The reason that I don't think this is science is because your experience, your particular reflection, is yours alone. It's the other mind's problem. And in that way, I can never verify what you say about that experience. So it's still intrinsically subjective and cannot be verified objectively. There's also the problem that we can always be wrong about our inner subjective experience. We can always be wrong about our objective experience, so-called objective experiences, but our subjective experience, to some degree, is a lot more open to, psychomatic suggestion. It's open to a wider range of interpretation and frameworks that we might see things, and it can't be verified. For example, there's a lot of people that obviously thought that demons are entering someone every time that they get possessed, or schizophrenia, different mental problems, and when certain fundy Christians are told to tell the person to expel these demons, that's a certain command which certainly does something to that person's psychology, but to call that science, I'm not obviously saying that you would call that science, but I'm saying these things and similar things do become open to the scientific method. Where I stand on the first person, third person divide, which obviously I think we can both agree is somewhat artificial, is that we do need to explore the first person a little bit more. This is perhaps more important for our own spiritual development, but in terms of academia and the research of consciousness, I think it also needs to be done more, but I don't think it needs to be done alone. I think you study the first person, you have perhaps a subject, and I think this needs to be done more often. A particular subject who has a particular experience, you monitor the neuronal connections and the different pathways, and then you say why you think that he's had this particular experience, and this from a neuronal level, of course, and this can not only enlighten, say if it was meditation, this not only helps us understand meditation better, but generally our consciousness altogether, and same thing with drugs, the same things with altered states of consciousness and people with mental deficiencies and so on and so on. But the only thing that we have to go on is that reportability, because it's not the subjective mind state of the person which is applicable to the scientific method, but only what that person reports, because that report is obviously objective in the fact that that report, if we consider it only as a report, can be put under scrutiny. And this is what I think compiles the scientific method. So I think that's where our difference is. I do think, of course, that we need to explore our own consciousness a little bit more, but at the same token, I think that we can always be wrong about the assumptions that we make, and this is what I think the problem was with the rationalists generally in philosophy, and this is where I think Descartes went wrong. He tried to explore the first person. He tried to come up with a method of consciousness by using a first person approach, and he's inherently flawed. So this is where I differ. So anyway, that's all I'm going to say. I hope to hear from you soon, and take care. Peace.